Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about a really sad and dark and pretty grim ruling, in my opinion, for the video game industry. As you guys probably know, if you've been like a long-term viewer here on the channel, I am a big proponent and I've made plenty of content and things talking about video game preservation, video game emulation, things like this, right? It is something that I'm pretty passionate about because I feel like not only just me, but so many of us in the gaming scene or whatever, right? You know, we look back extremely fondly on the past in video games, you know, all the games that we grew up playing as kids, no matter what age you are, you know what I mean? If you're in your 20s like me and you grew up with the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 and things like this, or even if you're old enough to remember the beginning, basically, of the commercial video game market, we all look back extremely fondly on it, whether it be one or dozens of games from our childhood that have basically influenced us in a bunch of different ways, right? Well, video game preservation has been a pretty hot button topic, not even just in the video game industry, but realistically across the entire entertainment industry, and there was a multi-year battle in the courts, basically, with the US Copyright Office and video game history people and pioneers and people who just basically want to preserve the history of video games. Now, this entire battle has been based around the idea of basically preserving video games in a way where people can still access them and still play them after however many years. I mean, there's multiple different reasons why, as time goes on, video games become harder and harder to access, but since we all love video games so much, and since we all care about this industry and this entertainment medium in general so much, many of us know that, like, the future of the video game industry doesn't necessarily guarantee that these things will be remembered fondly. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that people in future generations will be able to come back and look at these incredible games. So, a 3-year fight to help support game preservation has come to a sad end today. The US Copyright Office has denied a request for a DMCA exemption that would allow libraries to remotely share digital access to preserved video games. Quote, "For the past 3 years, the Video Game History Foundation has been supporting with the Software Preservation Network on a petition to allow libraries and archives to remotely share digital access to out-of-print video games in their collections." VGHF explains in its statement, quote, "Under the current anti-circumvention rules in Section 1201 of the DMCA, libraries and archives are unable to break copy protection on games in order to make them remotely accessible to researchers. Essentially, this exemption would open up the possibility of a digital library where historians and researchers could check out digital games that run through emulators. The VGHF argues that around 87% of all video games released in the US before 2010 are now out of print, and the only legal way to access those games now is through the occasionally exorbitant prices and often failing hardware that defines the retro gaming market." So there's a massive problem in the video game industry where even publishers and, you know, the companies that own the licenses and the rights to all these different IP, right? They don't necessarily care about how video games are perceived beyond the point of consumption commercially. So let's take Nintendo, for instance, because they're the company, you know, they've been notable in their efforts to try and, like, destroy emulation and try to destroy game preservation. This is a company that, like I said, you know, many of us, for instance, grew up with, like, the GameCube or the NES or the Nintendo 64, whatever it may be, right? Now, obviously, these consoles and the games manufactured for them are so old at this point that they aren't on the market really anymore, right? You, for instance, can't walk into GameStop and buy a brand new cartridge of Super Mario World, you know what I mean? And if you do, you're going to be paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, you know, depending on what game it is that you're trying to buy. And even if you do finally get your hands on, like, a physical copy of one of these old games that you want to preserve, or, you know, from your childhood or whatever, physical media ends up failing eventually, right? You know, CDs and DVDs, they eventually rot or break down. Hard drives break down. They fucking they decay. hardware, the parts inside of it maybe become non-functional, or the electrical wires or whatever fray. Things happen, and hardware, everything physical, it wears down. And so eventually, for games that came out in like the 90s, for instance, right, there will come a day where all of the cartridges that we have that save these games or whatever will just no longer work. They'll have rotted and decayed beyond the point of being usable. And if we don't have, digital archives, and we don't continue to physically archive these pieces of work, there is a legitimate chance that these games could literally become lost media or be overwashed in the history books, right? And I think that is a sad and terrible outcome for video games in general. And this is one of the things I talked about pretty extensively in the book I just published, right? Is the entire gaming industry essentially is trying to bury physical media in general, because publishers, they want to make it to where, you have to play video games always online. They want you to access an online point to be able to play the video game, even if it's single player. They want to be able to shut the game servers off whenever they feel necessary and kill the game so they can move on to the next project. And when a video game is no longer really making these companies money, they don't view it as anything anymore. I mean, in Hollywood, for instance, when a movie is no longer in the box office and it's no longer making the big bucks, it's still archived, it's still considered history. All these different production studios and shit, they've got entire warehouses full of like master reels for movies and, just like basically preserving all of this shit. But for whatever reason, the video game industry doesn't want to follow suit. They don't want these things to be viewed as artwork, which I don't understand, because anyone in their right mind knows that a video game is art in and of itself. And these things are so massively influential. I mean, think of all of the games that have came out over time that you think like, man, I hope my kids get to play that game someday because it's so phenomenal. But yet the industry and a lot of the fans in the industry are against the notion of preserving video games. They don't care about physical media. They don't care about archiving. They don't care about emulation. Or they believe these corporations like Nintendo at face value, and they think that these things are fucking harmful when they're not. And it just blows my mind. And then consider the fact that 87% of all games released in the US before 2010 are out of print. I mean, these publishers actively choose to stop making these games and to stop creating new copies of them, which created this entire retro market, right? Like when you go and you try and buy a retro game, good luck. I mean, for instance, a couple months ago, I went and I got Pokemon Gale of Darkness and I got Pokemon Coliseum for the GameCube. Both games came with like the manuals, obviously the disc, or well, the little GameCube disc. It had like everything that would come in a normal copy of it. Both games combined were over $400. So imagine trying to actually collect video games and preserve them. You either have to have just fucking buku money basically to spend on this shit, or you basically are just priced entirely out of the market. And all of these games are out of print, so when those games are getting sold, these publishers aren't even making money on that, right? So it really just doesn't make sense to me. Still, the US Copyright Office has said no. Quote, "The Register concludes that proponents did not show that removing the single user limitation for preserved computer programs or permitting off-premises access to video games are likely to be non-infringing according to the final ruling." Quote, "She also notes the greater risk of market harm with removing the video game exemption's premises limitation, given the market for legacy video games. That ruling cites the belief of the Entertainment Software Association and other industry lobby groups that, quote, there would be a significant risk that preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes. We cannot, of course, entertain the notion that researchers enjoy their subjects for even a moment. More importantly, this also ignores the fact that libraries already lend out digital versions of more traditional media like books and movies to everyday people for what can only be described as recreational purposes. Members of the VGHF are naturally unhappy with the decision. Unfortunately, lobbying efforts by rights holder groups continue to hold back progress. The group says in its statement, noting that the ESA's absolutist position that it would not support a similar sort of copyright reform under any circumstances. So I guess their idea, right, is that, well, if we allow people to create digital libraries where researchers and whatnot can check out copies of video games, and we can preserve these games and preserve their history and the impact that they made, apparently people will enjoy it. Oh my goodness, can you believe it, right? The researchers may have fun with their research. Oh my god. Now, imagine if you heard the same argument be made for like historians and once again the movie industry, right? Where it's like, well, if we allow people to watch the original Star Wars movie, I mean, geez, what if they enjoyed it while they were researching and, entertaining the classics? Oh my god, what would we do? Like, the whole point of a video game is that it is an entertainment medium, right? It is an entertainment product. You are supposed to have fun with a video game. That's like saying, okay, well, we're gonna preserve the history of comic books. Oh, well, we can't do that. People might enjoy it too much. People might have too much fun reading a Captain America, Like, what kind of stupid fucking argument is that, right? It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We can't preserve this recipe that's been passed down for generations for this really awesome stew because people might think it tastes too good, in fact. What if people enjoy it too much? Like, what a stupid fucking argument for like, well, we can't preserve history now. And the craziest part is the publishers, they support this. And the biggest argument in favor of it isn't even just like, oh, people may steal, whatever, right? All the stupid copes that you hear for, well, we can't preserve video games. All of those stupid copes, the main argument is that, well, there is already an established market with the retro gaming market, and what if we were unfair to the people who are selling GameCube games for $500 a pop? When they initially cost like 40, 50, 60 bucks, right? What if we hurt their feelings and they lost money? I mean, honestly, good. That's a good thing. These video games shouldn't cost thousands of dollars for sealed copies anyway. If publishers don't want to lose out on the revenue and whatnot of people wanting to play these old games, maybe they should continue manufacturing new copies so that people can buy them at a good price if they don't want that to happen. They literally make money by doing that. Nobody loses in that scenario, right? People get games cheaper, they're able to preserve them much easier, the corporation makes money for a game that they haven't made in 25 fucking years. Who loses, right? But no, they don't want to do that because, fuck you, that's why, basically. And then when you have the gumption to be like, maybe I shouldn't have to spend $400 to get 2 Pokemon games I liked when I was a kid. Maybe we should just have like digital access to these games that even Nintendo doesn't care enough to fucking make copies of anymore so that people can play it and you realize the impact. Oh no, we can't do that. Then people might have too much fun and the guy selling fucking Nintendo games for $900 might get hurt. It's just stupid. It's just so stupid. Video games are the only entertainment medium like this that is viewed in this light. You would never hear, well, I shouldn't say you would never, but realistically, you'd never hear people be like, we shouldn't preserve books. That's a bad idea. People might like reading too much. You never hear people say, we shouldn't archive Hollywood and make sure that all the American films and whatnot are, kept up or whatever. People might enjoy the movie too much. Like, I'm pretty convinced at this point that if libraries never existed, right, and somebody came up with the concept today, hey, we should make a library where people can go and check out books and movies and other things in our culture. I'm pretty certain if that was, like, actually brought up today, people would refuse it. They'd be like, fuck that, that's stupid. Why would we do that? We used to, like, revel in the idea of archiving our knowledge and all of our media and, realizing the impact that it had and, glamorizing its history. But now with everything digital, we seem to just want to turn away from that at every turn. And the thing about gaming is, digital preservation, that isn't really enough. There needs to be physical preservation that's constantly maintained to account for hardware failures and for, physical media rot and stuff. There needs to be digital archives to, back up the physical archives and provide more accessibility. And there needs to be actual, communication, I guess, between the publishers, the fans, and the historians. Because why are we comfortable with the idea of all of this incredible history just disappearing and being basically inaccessible to future generations? It's just fucking stupid. It really is just fucking stupid. I mean, 90% of all the video games that have ever been created are at a legitimate risk of being just completely forgotten to history. And we just seem to be completely okay with that. Like, once again, in the book, I talk about this. Like, why would we allow this? Why are people who are so passionate about video games so willing to watch this happen? I don't know. I really hope that this ends up getting overturned, man. This is just a terrible decision in general. And there's no really good, strong argument for it other than think of the corporation. Think of the sad corporation that shoots itself in the foot, handicaps itself, chooses not to make free money, and chooses not to preserve the art that their employees create. Did you think about their feelings today? Well, anyway, with that being said, guys, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shoptimus down below. Thank you to my Watch Optimus subscribers. Your support helps the channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, fighting for game preservation and signing out. And that's a wrap on this video, but big shout out to my Optimus Nation supporters. You guys are the real MVPs. For $10 a month, you get access to loads of exclusive videos and archived live streams, my members-only Minecraft server where you can possibly appear in gameplay, early access to all new uploads, an invitation to the private Discord, and much more.